very renowned UK professor, and he's Professor Michael Short, and he's also doing excellent. And he will. Okay, so he's from Teesside University, and he's also like the lead. He's leading a group with smart energy research, and I will read a detail of his profile in a edited video. So over to you, just to save time. Yeah, over to you, Professor Michael Short.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. Apologies for dialing in a little later than I'd hoped to.
No, that's all right.
Unavoidable engagements with children.
No,
Michael,
understand.
can I just ask you if you could lower the blind behind you, because we can't see you, we just see the lights.
Yes, sure thing. Blinded by the light.
Blinded by the light, yes.
Let me just. Is that a little better?
Yeah,
Perfect.
much better. Yeah, much better.
Great, great. Okay, let me try and share my screen. And PowerPoint show. So hopefully that's coming through now.
Yeah, it's coming. Thank you.
Okay, so yeah, great to be given the opportunity to talk this afternoon. Title of my presentation is the 4IR, the Fourth Industrial Revolution. And what I intend to do is try and give an overview about how we can leverage STEM, science, technology, engineering, and maths and concept from sustainability to try and forge a new deal. So really it's about giving a perspective from the northeast of the UK, trying to make sense of some of the upheaval that we've seen in recent years, some of the social, political upheaval, how that's resulted in things like the result of the Brexit referendum, pulling in concepts from North America, sort of surprising election results in North America, and trying to make sense of what this all means in terms of inequality, and trying to give an overview of how we've responded to these challenges at Teesside University. Okay, so let me advance the slides. Okay, so after trying to pin down or investigate some of the issues that we face, there's a lot of upheaval in UK higher education at the minute. I'll sort of give an overview of the fourth industrial revolution. Just many people will be aware of it, but some people perhaps not. Look at some of the drivers, some of the opportunities, and also some of the challenges. And the challenges really need to be addressed, not just in the UK and the West, but across the world in general. Change is needed. So then I'll bring in concepts of how we can take the concepts of the fourth industrial revolution and try and forge a new deal, a new social deal. Get as many people on board as we can. Introduce concepts such as donut economics. And then before closing the talk, a bit of an overview on the people skills that we need as we move into this brave new world, and also the leadership skills that we're going to need as well. Okay, so first, a bit of an overview. Lots of restructuring has taken place at my university over the last 3 years. Bit of a change of direction in many aspects. So in my own school, computing, engineering and digital technologies, we've just launched 2 new research centres. The Centre for Digital Innovation, led by my colleague Alamgir Hussain, and the Centre for Sustainable Engineering, which led by myself, and a number of different research groups within these centres. And overall, what we've tried to do is align the research groups and our research activities a little bit more towards the new industry strategy that's being published by the UK government, whilst also trying to keep in line with the wider schemes as well. The kind of funding that we've traditionally leveraged has been some from UK government, a lot more proportionally from Europe, FP7, Horizon 2020. But we're also involved in larger schemes, grand challenges, TCRF, and so on. So a little bit of a strategic realignment, and I'll try and explain exactly why that is taking place. So traditionally, a lot of research is focused on areas such as robotics, process control, analytics, smart energy systems. One thing that we perhaps collectively haven't asked ourselves are what are the possibly unintentional impacts of our research? More and more, there's focus on research assessment exercises on what are the positive impacts of our work, and trying to tease out how a particular piece of technology has been transferred to a company and created jobs, created revenue for the company, had some kind of societal impact. All of these positives we try very, very hard to distill and put them at the forefront of things like press releases. But there are lots of unintentional impacts of technological research as well. So where we are at, overall, a bit of a mess. Rising inequalities since the financial crash, perception of a high-tech and low-skill divide in society, job displacement, the gig economy, lack of stable work, general rising anger and resentment reflected in the degradation of politics to an almost satirical joke at times, certainly in the UK. Rising tide of anti-science, pseudoscience and fake news, fueled quite a lot by social media, things like anti-vaxxers, the recent incorrect information about the sources of coronavirus that swept the UK, and general political upheaval. And the two biggest examples of this in recent times, the election of Donald Trump, the UK's vote to leave the European Union, the Brexit vote. But this is also manifested in different ways across Europe and of course parts of Asia as well. Example would be the Gilets jaunes in France, general expressions of unhappiness with the way the world is changing. So if we try and dig a little bit deeper under the bonnet, we can see here UK productivity, January to March 97 to January to March 2015. And we can see, I don't know if my mouse pointer is coming through, probably not, but at the start of the economic downturn, projected growth stopped. A little bit of a recession, but then basically, economically, we have flatlined. Lack of economic growth since the financial crash. And if we have a look, again, this is data from the US, but if we have a look at data from US job growth, I believe very similar patterns can be observed in the UK. We can see a couple of noticeable trends. So non-routine cognitive work, so-called high-skilled employment, that's risen steadily. We can see a bit of a flat line after 2007, but from 2010, that started rising again. Non-routine manual work, we can see, again, that's been relatively unaffected, slow but steady growth. But if we start to look a little bit closer at routine cognitive work and routine manual, so it's sort of middle class, traditionally middle class jobs, middle income, we can see something started to happen around about 1990 in that growth just leveled off. We see again after 2007 a little bit of recession, lack of growth in these areas. But unlike non-routine cognitive work, since 2010 these have still flatlined. See an example there, recession again followed by recovery. Recession followed by flatline. So although we can say in general, some sectors have experienced economic growth after the downturn. A lot have just flatlined, and they were flatlining before the financial crash as well. So, boom. Problems, lack of economic growth in certain sections of society, expressions of unhappiness and political upheaval. The UK's famous vote to leave the EU surprised almost everyone who tried to predict this result, as is well known. The election of Donald Trump, again, that was a very unexpected political event, went against all of the pollsters, and in general, it's seen as a bit of a populist backlash. So what analysis has been done? Well, lots of people have tried to analyse things like the socio-economic factors that went into the UK's vote to leave the EU. The biggest correlation that has actually been found so far relates to the probability of automation displacing jobs in a specific area. So the jobs with the highest votes to leave the UK, Boston, Mansfield, Great Yarmouth, and so on, have the highest probability of jobs being automated and have been historically automated in the past. Whereas the areas with the lowest proportion of leave votes, Wandsworth, Kensington and Chelsea, Three Rivers and so on, Oxford, they have the lowest probability of automation. And we can almost see probability of automation, it's almost a proxy for relative risk of job stability going forward. But this is an extremely high correlation, the strongest correlation that's yet been found to the EU voting pattern in the UK. Similar evidence exists for the US 2016 presidential election. So, delving a little bit further under the bonnet, what's going on here? We know there's a link between political upheaval and voting patterns and jobs, the nature of work in certain areas, and the risk that the job can be technologically displaced. A large study was carried out back in 2013 by Oxford economists Frey and Osborne. They looked at approximately 900 individual job roles defined by the US Department of Labour and calculated the probability that that job would be displaced, it would be automated. So some of the most susceptible jobs, looking at the 99% risk of automation in areas like telemarketers. And we've already seen, you may well have experienced, if you try and contact a bank, more often than not, you will be passed to a call centre, and you might not even speak to a human being in order to check the balance of your account and so on. High level of automation around telemarketing, sewing, insurance underwriting, general repairs, cargo and freight agents, data entry technicians, brokerage clerks. So lots of jobs which are traditionally done by working class people have just been automated away. This has created a large amount of resentment. But what's a little bit more surprising is the number of jobs, middle income jobs, which have traditionally been safe from technological displacement, but which have started to see an increasing level of automation. By way of example, there was a study back end of last year, powerful antibiotic discovered using machine learning for the first time. This was by a team at MIT, and they've discovered 2 new antibiotics which can kill some of the world's most dangerous strains, the kind of strains which have become immune to regular treatment. And if we just delve a little bit deeper under the bonnet, Stokes, one of the people who led the study, said it would have been impossible to screen all 107 million compounds by the conventional route of obtaining and making the substances and then testing them in the laboratory. Being able to perform these experiments on the computer dramatically reduced the time and cost to look at the compounds. So here we see an example of where job displacement is starting to encroach into more middle-income jobs, lab technician jobs. And that can make people fearful. If your employment is at risk, then you become fearful for the future, and you tend to adopt a more defensive, aggressive stance, and you want to keep and hold onto what you've got. That can lead to things like rising tides of nationalism and so on. The election of leaders who are a lot more dominant and aggressive in the way they approach politics. So there are regulatory issues around this as well, and the regulatory environment can play quite a significant role. Because if you allow technology to displace jobs, but then you don't retrain people and encourage them into new jobs, then people can just feel cast aside, left adrift. And that's certainly had an influence in the city in which I work, Middlesbrough, voted heavily to leave the EU. And lots of interviews and studies have shown that people can't find work and feel as though they've been just cast adrift, abandoned by the UK government and abandoned by the European government as well. Now, there is, however, a regulatory sweet spot to do with how much we regulate innovation so that the economy can grow, and how much money is then invested back into upskilling and retraining. And specifically, if we're looking at technological job displacement, the kind of reskilling that we have to be interested in is to upskill people in areas such as STEM, make them, if they're not digital natives, make them and prepare them to engage with the digital economy. So just by way of example, a lab technician traditionally may well have a bachelor's degree, a master's degree in the scientific related subject, and might spend a lot of time working in a lab, have the skills required. I'm not that kind of scientist, I'm more an engineer and a mathematician. But I understand very specialized skills traditionally involved indeed a lab technician. More and more, as we've seen with the MIT example, the kind of skills that you might need to become a very successful laboratory technician involve data science, being able to work with data, analyze data, manipulate it, gather it from equipment. So that just as a single example, those are the kinds of issues that we may need to focus on. So, how has the UK government tried to respond to some of these issues? New direction for the UK and trying to engage with this serious industrial strategy. We haven't done very well traditionally, certainly not in the northeast, in areas of the Midlands, which voted heavily to leave the EU. We haven't engaged very well in terms of industry over the last 15 to 20 years. So Siemens, one of our industrial partners that we work very closely with, the then CEO of Siemens was commissioned to lead a review, and the production, the principal output was the Made Smarter report, which was published spring 2017, all about upskilling and preparing the UK to take its place in the fourth industrial revolution. The UK government is looking at the regulatory framework in preparation for large amounts of innovation and funding coming in to support new technology. So what are the perceived opportunities? Well, the third industrial revolution, so-called digital revolution, which started around about the 1980s, early 1990s. The use of general purpose microprocessors available at very low cost, increasing automation and robotics, concepts such as flexible manufacturing, and also importantly, the evolution of the internet. So if we add on top of that, infrastructure, digitalization. So concepts such as the rollout of 5G, the Internet of Things, the industrial Internet of Things, IP version 6, differentiated services, time-sensitive networking. All of these concepts which are aimed at providing full digitalization of infrastructure, certainly in the UK, but in other parts of the world as well. And with respect to an individual company or business, what this means essentially is that whereas traditionally we may have had lots of automation in, say, a factory, with infrastructure digitalization, we can extend this beyond the factory and digitalize the entire supply chain of a particular product, right from the sourcing of materials, the logistics involved in the transportation of materials, the procurement and supply of energy, the manufacturing process itself, and also the final stage, delivery of products to customers, feedback from customers, the business aspect. Everything can be digitized and brought together. So what we get, huge amounts of data. Impossible to analyze these size and velocity of data in real time by an individual human. So the other part of the fourth industrial revolution relates to the use of artificial intelligence. Concepts such as deep learning, use of advanced heuristics, predictive analytics, and optimization. And the World Economic Forum a few years ago identified a 100 trillion opportunity for industry and society through the adoption of these two types of technologies: industrial infrastructure digitalization and artificial intelligence. So that's the opportunity. What are the challenges, and how does this relate to some of the inequality that's arisen in society today? Well, a very famous author from Greece produced some excellent predictions about 25 years ago on how technology would shape the world and what it might look like around the year 2020. He was surprisingly accurate. So what are his predictions for how the forthcoming AI revolution, what will its impact be on society and firms? And a great quote from him is, "Creative destruction is at the heart of market economies and a major contributor to productivity increase, as well as offering of a greater choice of products and services to consumers." So we're seeing two sides captured in one statement of a coin. The positive, in that we have greater choice of products and services to consumers at lower cost. We've seen that. Companies such as Amazon can offer the same goods that you could buy from the high street at a lower cost. But what this creates is high levels of creative destruction. Everyone orders from Amazon and doesn't shop from the high street, then high street shops start to close. That's the essence, if you like, of capitalism. And it's being accelerated via technology. And another good quote, paper from 2018 with a very distinct title, "Should we fear the robot revolution?" The correct answer is yes. So yeah, perhaps we don't even have to read the paper itself with a title like that. But it's a very interesting techno-economic study of automation, where we've been, where we are, and potentially where we can go. And just to summarize one of the statements from the conclusion, while automation renders some jobs obsolete, it complements many others, especially jobs that place a premium on creativity, flexibility, and abstract reasoning. So what we can pick out here is that there are opportunities, great opportunities, but there are costs as well. And there are challenges that we simply have to deal with. We can't avoid the shift in the need for higher levels of STEM right through society. This is where employment is going. The main growth areas: artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things, driverless vehicles, nano biotechnology, renewable energy. That's one big focus of the research group which I lead. Quantum computing, and also fintech, financial technology. So those are the main growth areas, and we know that we need high levels of STEM in order to support growth in those areas. But is that the end of the story? What else do we need to complete this picture? Well, we can't just grow indefinitely. We need to have a complete rethink about economic models. There is no way that we can just sustain indefinite growth, especially when it's accelerating and we are potentially seeing such high levels of creative destruction. So we have to think about a sustainable future and how we can do things in such a way that the rate at which we consume resources does not threaten their availability for future generations. But this doesn't just apply to natural resources, energy and so on, and the use of fossil fuels. We have to start to think holistically about the effects of technology and how that can influence the economy and have a sustainable economy. And the kind of people skills that we need to foster in order to take us where we need to be. Obviously, a focus on complex problem solving, critical thinking, introduction of data science, computational statistics, and heavy focus on STEM subjects throughout the curricula. Certainly, our courses in engineering, we teach the traditional aspects of engineering, say a chemical engineering course. But every single engineering course that we teach now has at least one module dedicated to data science. We can't avoid having data science on our courses. But other skills that we need, creativity. Far too often the focus on KPIs in effect kills creativity. We know we're encouraged at almost every step as teachers and lecturers to meet targets, meet KPIs. We can't avoid this. We have to be judged in some way on the quality of our teaching. But we have to recognize that focusing on teaching purely to meet KPIs can kill creativity. And certainly at university level, this is something that we have to avoid. We need to foster and encourage creativity as much as possible. A focus on people management, coordinating with others, emotional intelligence and empathy. One thing that computers cannot do, even with the best levels of current artificial intelligence, is really show empathy. They can mimic it, but they can't actually show it. Emotional intelligence within the workforce is key to having a workforce that can engage effectively. Teaching people how to coordinate with others, not just focus on the self continually. Critical judgment and decision making, negotiation, cognitive flexibility. And also move people away from the concept or the kind of thinking whereby you become entitled to think that you've got a job for life in one particular area. This just doesn't apply anymore. We have to move people away, get them thinking flexibly, so that you may start off on one particular career path, and that may change 3 or 4 times during the course of your employment. So different societal and workplace aspects. I will skip over these as I'm just about out of time.
No, no, you can carry on. We have
The overall work environment, the traditional way that we've done things, certainly in the West, has been a bit of an ecosystem with the big boss at the top. It's all about him, chain of command and control moving down. The way this impacts organizations, and I'm sure everyone will have experienced this to some extent, is that we can start to work in independent silos. So work in one particular department, the engineering department, becomes completely disconnected and unrelated to work in another department. Let's say the business school, with very little interaction between the two. We're all trying to meet our own KPIs. We're all working under certain people. We all have a different agenda, and that just fosters self-interest and a lack of cooperation and communication. And at Teesside, more and more over the last 3 years, we try to move away from this and adopt an ecosystem, which is more cooperative and collaborative, in which it's not just all about me, but it's more about us. There is clear chains of command, a clear leadership structure, but in terms of how this leadership is enforced is slightly changed. It becomes more collaborative, more interested in influence rather than direct command, more interested in leadership through prestige and persuasion than leadership through intimidation and my way or the highway. It's all about mutual empowerment, mutual support, sharing knowledge, and also taking mutual accountability. Trying to fight less over KPIs related to bidding targets and so on. But that is in general seen in the work. As I mentioned, we do quite a lot of work with Siemens in the UK and the rest of Europe. Siemens is one of the companies that is moving away from the ecosystem more towards the ecosystem as well. So this kind of change in leadership styles, it's slow to come about, but it's definitely happening. And a good article in New Scientist recently about different types of leadership skills and how in the world today there are two types of leader. We have the leadership style of someone like Donald Trump, based on dominance and control, versus the leadership style of someone like Jacinda Ardern, based on respect and prestige. That's an interesting article if you have access to New Scientist. And different ways to look at this, but there are actually positive qualities in both leadership styles. Donald Trump, he's a character, not everyone's favorite, but there are good points and bad points about the way he chooses to lead. Sometimes he's overly aggressive, but he's a very good deal maker. Again, the leadership styles of others, Jacinda Ardern, extremely good at building collaborations and networks, but can be perceived by some of the voters in New Zealand as being soft in terms of negotiation and the issues such as defence. So trying to find a blend, the right blend, it's very subjective and it can change dynamically. But what we see at Teesside is good leadership. We'll have a blend of skills. We can take an example from Star Wars, which incorporates a lot of Yoda and a little bit of Darth Vader. So being knowledgeable, having the prestige, but also being assertive, being able to make decisions, communicate those decisions clearly, and make things happen and take opportunities as and when they arrive. Trying to find the right blend, and it's not necessarily going to be fixed in stone either. It can change dynamically over time.
excellent.
So, in summary, the world is changing very quickly, and this can create a lot of uncertainty. And a quote from John Chambers, ex-CEO of Cisco: probably 40% of the world's leading companies will not exist 10 years from now. We're seeing examples of this certainly in the UK. Large companies gone by the wire. Travel companies, companies on the high street, shedding jobs, going into receivership. Things are happening very quickly. The world is changing. And the way we see is to accept this change and try and find ways to win anywhere. There was a good quote at the end of the last presentation, in that failure is not the opposite of success. Failure is on the pathway to success. And sometimes we fail. For me, the results in the EU referendum, that was a very big blow, considering that we take so much funding traditionally, my university, from the EU. But again, we view this not as a failure, but as a lesson to try and learn. And we try and engage more now with the local community. And we're doing our best to work with the UK government to find ways around the problems and to leverage funding as and where we can find. So the world is changing. Adopt STEM and try and produce empathic workers and strong but fair leaders who are in leadership positions because they deserve to be.
Excellent. Great talk, Professor.
Yeah, so I'll finish there. Hopefully it was pitched at the right level. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Yeah, we can take one question because the next speaker is waiting. Any question? One question, please.
Yeah, Asif. I think you're on mute.
No.
Thank you very much. It was very enlightening and humorous at the same time. So I appreciate it. So do you think automation is going to be a maybe turbo boost more inequality?
Potentially, if we allow things to continue the way they have done, it will lead to more and more inequality, automation and digitalization. We have to, in my view, and certainly others in my institution, we have to respond to this in a way which is more sustainable in terms of the economy and the impact on jobs.
And how do you see the fear factor that you talked about? And I recognize that because in the Midlands is the same thing. How do you minimize that fear factor people have of others?
Of others, yeah. In general, people tend to be fearful of others when they see them as a threat. That they can maybe take something from them which they don't want to give. So the perception, some migrants, you've probably heard some of the rhetoric, people coming here and taking our jobs and so on. Well, if you upskill people so they're more likely and they have more options available to them in terms of the jobs that they can apply for, they feel less threatened by people who might impact on what they see as the jobs which are available at their level. And a bit of an example of this in the Northeast, traditional taxi firms have felt very under threat by Uber and the model that Uber has adopted. Very digital, it encourages the gig economy. And really, there was lots of hostility. Oh, we don't want Uber around here. We're not putting up with that. When you really get to the nitty-gritty of the problem, and you say, okay, so they're using the internet and digital marketing, and they're adopting flexible working policies for the drivers. Why don't you do that? Yeah. Oh, we haven't got the skills to do that. We can't create an app Oh, okay, so if we give you some free training courses and then help you create an app, would that help? Oh yeah, that'd be great. So now quite a lot of the taxi firms in the Northeast use their own apps, and the customers love it. And they're less likely to use Uber, and Uber becomes less of a threat. And you get a greater balance in terms of how people feel about these new technologies and outsiders potentially coming in to take what's theirs.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Professor Short. We will continue.